There is a moment in every seeker's life when the path stops being an idea and becomes a lived experience. It's rarely dramatic. It doesn't arrive with visions, voices, or flashes of celestial certainty. It begins quietly, almost shyly, when a person realizes their inner life matters more than anything the world can measure. And if you pay close attention, that moment marks the beginning of a much deeper journey, the decision to become inwardly honest. This is the story of what happens when someone tries to live from that honesty. Not the polished spiritual persona, not the romanticized mystic, but the raw human being who wakes up each morning knowing they will battle their own mind. Because awakening is not a single event, it is a series of countless choices, small choices, quiet choices, invisible to everyone but you. Most people imagine spiritual transformation as a dramatic revelation, but the truth is far more intimate. It happens in the moments when you resist snapping at someone who irritates you, when you notice a judgment rising and choose not to feed it, when you feel the impulse to withdraw and instead you soften. These micro-decisions shape the soul the same way water shapes stone, slowly, relentlessly, imperceptibly, until one day the inner landscape is different from anything you remember. But transformation only begins when a person commits to paying attention, real attention, the kind that is uncomfortable, the kind that forces you to see the shadows you once blamed on everyone else. And the moment you begin to watch your mind honestly, something unexpected happens. The world stops being your enemy. It becomes your mirror. Every reaction reveals you. Every conflict explains you. Every irritation exposes something you were unwilling to see. This is where the spiritual path becomes both beautiful and brutal. Because once you begin to watch your own mind, you lose the luxury of pretending you are innocent in your suffering. You can no longer claim that someone else is the reason you're upset. You begin to see clearly that the battlefield was always inside. And yet in that same clarity, an extraordinary tenderness emerges. You begin to realize how frightened the ego truly is, how desperately it clings to familiar patterns, how convinced it is that control is the only path to safety. And compassion becomes the natural response, not just for others, but for the version of you who has spent a lifetime trying to survive without knowing how. Spiritual practice is not about perfection. It is about returning to the quiet place inside where the mind becomes transparent and the heart becomes teachable. Returning to the space where truth can whisper because the noise has finally softened. Returning to the awareness that you are always choosing between fear and love, between attack and blessing, between contraction and release. But no one can walk this path alone. The illusion of isolation collapses as soon as you realize that your mind and the minds of others are not as separate as they appear. Every thought you hold, every perception you reinforce, changes the way others meet you. Change your perception, and the entire texture of a relationship shifts, sometimes instantly. It feels miraculous, but it is simply the law of consciousness. What you see in others draws itself out of them. There is something deeply humbling about this. It means that your responsibility is larger than you imagined. Your inner world is not private. It radiates, it teaches, it influences. Your clarity can steady someone else. Your fear can destabilize them. You are participating in a field of minds, not a universe of isolated bodies, and your state of consciousness is always transmitting something. This is why being helpful is not an optional part of the spiritual path. It is the path. The moment you decide to be a source of clarity for someone else, your own mind sharpens. When you try to lift someone, you rise with them. When you sincerely want another person's well-being, you step out of the cramped confines of the ego and breathe a larger air. But to be truly helpful, you have to learn to listen. Not to the surface noise, not to your fears, not to your rehearsed opinions or your clever explanations. You learn to listen to something quieter than all of that, something beneath thought, something stable, calm, and wise. Some call it guidance, some call it intuition, some call it the voice of the heart. What matters is not the name, but the willingness to hear it. Guidance rarely shouts. It rarely gives you the whole map. It gives you the next step, the next gentle correction, the next small nudge toward sanity. And you follow it not because you understand everything, but because you recognize the quality of peace that comes with it. Real guidance never produces anxiety. It always brings a softening, a settling, a sense that the inner turbulence has been replaced by a clear stillness. It is in this stillness that your life becomes purposeful. Not dramatic, purposeful. The purpose of extending love where fear once ruled. The purpose of offering clarity where confusion once echoed. The purpose of seeing others as they truly are, not as your ego has cast them. Every moment becomes a classroom. Every interaction becomes a meeting with yourself. Every challenge becomes an invitation to rise a little higher. And then something even more extraordinary happens. You begin to notice progress, not perfection, progress. The emotional reactions that once ruled you start to loosen. The irritations that felt explosive now dissolve faster. The judgments that once justified your anger feel hollow. The impulse to blame others loses its appeal. You become a little kinder, a little quieter, a little more patient with the disowned parts of yourself. This is the beginning of real freedom. Not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to meet life with a steadiness you didn't know you could possess. The freedom to respond instead of react. The freedom to see instead of assume. The freedom to love instead of defend. Transformation does not require mystical talent. It does not require psychic gifts, visions, or supernatural abilities. It requires sincerity. The kind of sincerity that is willing to see the truth even when it contradicts your pride. The kind that is willing to admit, I was wrong about this person, or I misunderstood this situation, or my fear distorted my perception. This humility becomes the doorway to wisdom, not the brittle wisdom of intellectual knowledge, but the living wisdom that grows inside you when your heart opens. You begin to realize that goodness is not naive. It is the highest form of intelligence. To be good, in a world trained to attack, is an act of radical strength. To be gentle, in a culture addicted to conflict, is a form of courage. To love in the presence of fear is a superpower. And when you practice this consistently, imperfectly, but sincerely, people notice. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be intimidated by it, but everyone will be affected by it. Because when a human being becomes more whole inside, that wholeness radiates through their eyes, their presence, their tone, their decisions, their silence. This is the real spiritual path. Not the spectacular, but the sincere. Not the dramatic, but the disciplined. Not the extraordinary, but the deeply human journey of someone who chooses to become a little more loving each day, regardless of how many times they fail. Awakening is not something that happens to you. It is something you become through your choices, through your willingness, through your honesty. Every day is an opportunity. Every interaction is a practice. Every judgment is a doorway. And every moment is another chance to choose the world you want to live in. This is where the journey begins. But beginning is never the hard part. The hard part is continuing. Continuing on the days when your mind feels heavy. Continuing when your ego insists you're not progressing. Continuing when old patterns resurface and shame tries to convince you that nothing has changed. The spiritual path is not measured by how inspired you feel. It is measured by how faithfully you return to the practices that open your heart, especially when they no longer feel glamorous. Every seeker eventually discovers this. Discipline is love in motion. Not the rigid, punishing discipline of the ego, but the gentle, unwavering discipline of someone who remembers why they started. Every time you come back to awareness, every time you remember to watch your thoughts, every time you choose patience over irritation, You are demonstrating love for your own soul. This love is subtle. It rarely feels triumphant. It is the kind of love that clears the mind quietly, like a teacher arranging a classroom before the students arrive. It prepares a space for insight. It prepares a space for forgiveness. It prepares a space for truth to enter without resistance. And in that prepared space, the inner voice becomes clearer. Not always loud, but unmistakable. You begin to sense the difference between the voice of fear and the voice of truth, between the mind that contracts and the mind that expands. Truth always expands you. It opens a window inside you. It widens the horizon of what you thought was possible. Fear collapses everything. It shrinks the world until you feel trapped inside your own thoughts. Learning to distinguish these two inner voices is the most important skill on the spiritual path. Without it, you drown in self-doubt. With it, you become unstoppable. You realize that you do not need certainty to move forward. You need trust. Trust that the quiet truth within you is more reliable than the noise outside you. Trust that inner peace is not a reward, but a compass. Trust that what you give to others returns to you in ways the ego cannot calculate. Trust transforms your life in ways that discipline alone cannot. Discipline keeps you steady. Trust allows you to rise, but trust is not blind. It is earned through experience, small demonstrations that begin to accumulate. You ask for guidance and receive an unexpected sense of clarity. You follow a gentle intuition and witness a conflict soften. You choose forgiveness and feel your mind unlock, as if emotional gravity itself has loosened. These moments add up. They become evidence that something wiser than your habitual mind is guiding you. And once you have enough evidence, something miraculous happens. You begin to rely on guidance instead of forcing your way through life. This is when the ego becomes afraid. Not because inner guidance is dangerous, but because it threatens the ego's central illusion that control equals safety. The ego is terrified of surrender, terrified of not being the one who decides, terrified that peace will cost it its identity. But surrender is not the loss of identity. It is the release of the false identity you were never meant to carry. Surrender is the moment when you stop negotiating with fear and let truth rearrange your priorities. It is the moment when you stop performing for the world and begin listening to your own soul. And this listening is where transformation accelerates. Because guidance never asks you to abandon your life. It asks you to purify your perception of it. It asks you to see the people around you not as threats or obstacles, but as mirrors revealing the parts of your mind that still need healing. Every person becomes a lesson. Every relationship becomes a classroom. Every misunderstanding becomes an invitation to see more clearly. As you practice this, you notice something extraordinary. Your reactions begin to change before you even choose them. Situations that once triggered anger now bring curiosity. Conversations that once felt draining now feel meaningful. People you once judged begin to soften in your perception. You realize that the world hasn't changed. Your mind has. And that shift in perception begins to radiate outward. When you see someone's innocence, they feel it. When you hold a loving perception of them, something inside them relaxes. This is not magic. It is resonance. Minds respond to the way they are seen. Your presence becomes a quiet form of healing. Not because you are special, but because you are present. Present enough to see someone beyond their defenses. Present enough to notice the light beneath their fear. Present enough to remember that every person you meet is fighting a battle inside themselves, even if they never speak of it. This kind of seeing is its own form of service. It is the beginning of being truly helpful. To be truly helpful is not to fix others. It is to hold a vision of them that is larger than the one they hold of themselves. It is to trust their strength when they are tired. It is to remember their worth when they forget it. It is to see their potential when their ego insists they are broken. And you cannot do this unless you are also doing it for yourself. Helping others is a mirror. Every time you lift someone, you encounter the part of you that also needs lifting. Every time you extend love, you feel the resistance in yourself that still fears love. Every time you offer clarity, you must clarify your own mind first. This is how spiritual growth unfolds, through relational alchemy, the exchange of minds, the recognition of shared humanity, the courage to show up with sincerity even when your own heart is uncertain. The more you practice this relational awareness, the more you see how deeply interconnected everything is. A single act of kindness changes the trajectory of someone's day. A single moment of patience softens what could have become a conflict. A single decision to listen prevents someone from collapsing into despair. These moments are invisible in the grand machinery of the world, but they are everything. They are the places where destiny bends. This is why progress matters, not perfection. Progress. The honest, steady, sometimes slow movement toward a more loving mind. Progress is not measured by mystical experiences. It is measured by your willingness to choose peace when fear tempts you. It is measured by the times you apologize without defending yourself. It is measured by the moments you breathe before reacting. It is measured by the courage to admit, I want to grow, even when you don't know how. Progress is the heartbeat of the spiritual path. Some days, progress feels effortless. Other days, it feels like walking uphill through wet sand. But even on those difficult days, something is happening inside you. A new strength is being born. A new patience is being formed. A new clarity is taking shape. Transformation occurs not in the peaks, but in the persistence. And the more persistent you are, the more light gathers within you. Light not as metaphor, but as a real felt presence, an inner radiance that subtly shifts how people experience you. They may not be able to explain it. They may not even consciously notice it, but they feel safer around you. They feel seen. They feel understood. They feel less alone. This quiet radiance is the natural result of inner alignment. When your mind stops contradicting itself, your presence becomes coherent. When your intentions and actions match, your energy becomes stable. When your heart is no longer fighting your thoughts, peace flows through you like water through an unclogged riverbed. This is what the world needs more than anything. Human beings who are coherent inside. People who are not ruled by their fear. People who can offer calm in a storm. People who can hold space for others without absorbing their chaos. People who can be good, not naively, but intentionally. Goodness is the highest intelligence because it sees reality without distortion. It recognizes the fear in others without judging them for it. It understands that attack is a cry for help. It knows that forgiveness is not weakness, but the release of illusions. Goodness is the courage to live without resentment, the courage to choose compassion when it is least convenient, the courage to be guided by truth instead of pride. And the path toward goodness is available to anyone who sincerely wants it. It is not reserved for saints. It does not require supernatural gifts. It requires willingness, humility, consistency, and the courage to return to your practice no matter how many times you fall. Because every return strengthens you. Every moment of awareness plants a seed. Every act of kindness expands your capacity. Every surrender deepens your peace. And one day, without knowing exactly when it happened, you realize something. You are no longer the same person you were. Something has softened. Something has opened. Something has awakened. This is the quiet miracle of the spiritual path, the slow, steady rebirth of your mind. But awakening is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new kind of responsibility, the responsibility of carrying light into a world still learning to see. When you begin to change, life does not suddenly become easier. In fact, it may become more challenging because your awareness has grown. You see more, you feel more. You notice the subtle places where fear still whispers. You recognize the ways in which old habits try to return. And you realize that the ego is not defeated by a single insight. It is dissolved through a lifetime of choices. Awakening gives you clarity, but it does not take away your freedom. You still choose which voice to follow. You still choose how to interpret the world. You still choose whether to respond with love or defend yourself with fear. Each choice becomes magnified because you are no longer unconscious. You know what you are doing, and that knowledge is both liberating and humbling. This humility becomes the foundation of your future growth. You begin to understand that spiritual maturity is not about transcending your humanity, but embodying it more fully. It is the ability to bring your highest awareness into your most ordinary moments, the moments when you are tired, the moments when someone disappoints you, the moments when you feel misunderstood. These are the moments that shape your character far more than the moments of inspiration. True spiritual strength is measured not by what you can do when you feel enlightened, but by how you behave when you feel lost. And you will feel lost. Even the most dedicated seeker encounters periods of confusion, dryness, discouragement, or emotional fatigue. These phases are not signs of failure. They are signs of recalibration. Just as a muscle grows through cycles of stress and repair, your spiritual capacity expands through cycles of clarity and uncertainty. When you enter these darker seasons, something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Your old identity is dissolving. Your outdated beliefs are being stripped away. Your deeper truth is preparing to emerge. These periods of contraction are necessary. They strengthen your discernment. They deepen your resilience. They teach you to trust the light even when you cannot feel it. And when the light returns, as it always does, you rise with a new depth of compassion, a new patience, a new softness toward yourself and others. You realize that everyone is fighting a battle you cannot see. Everyone is carrying a history of unhealed wounds. Everyone is walking through their own private night in search of mourning. This realization changes the way you relate to others. Judgment becomes less interesting. Anger becomes less convincing. Superiority becomes impossible. You begin to see that you are not better or worse than anyone. You are simply another traveler on the same mysterious path, learning the same lessons through different experiences. This recognition marks the transition from spiritual ambition to spiritual maturity. Ambition is the desire to achieve enlightenment. Maturity is the desire to love. Ambition wants to be special. Maturity wants to be useful. Ambition is self-focused. Maturity is soul-focused. And the soul's greatest desire is not to be admired, but to contribute. This is where your practice becomes anchored in service, not service as self-sacrifice, but service as authenticity. You begin to ask, how can I bring clarity to this moment? How can I help someone feel seen? How can I make this interaction a little more loving? These questions reshape your entire approach to life. They transform everyday encounters into opportunities for healing. Even the smallest acts become meaningful. A pause before reacting, a gentle tone when you feel irritated, a willingness to listen without interrupting, a softening in your eyes when someone speaks with fear. These gestures may seem insignificant, but they ripple outward in ways you cannot predict. You never know how deeply a single moment of presence can touch another person's life. Presence is the greatest gift you can offer the world. Not advice, not solutions, not spiritual theories. Presence. The kind of presence that says, I am here with you. I am not judging you. You are safe. Most people live their entire lives without truly feeling seen. When you offer genuine presence, you become a sanctuary in a restless world. This sanctuary grows in proportion to your inner discipline. A disciplined mind creates a peaceful presence. A peaceful presence creates a healing environment, and a healing environment invites others to rise to their own potential. But discipline is not rigidity. It is devotion, a devotion to truth, a devotion to integrity, a devotion to the highest within you. Discipline is choosing to align with love even when fear feels justified. It is choosing clarity over confusion. It is choosing inner peace over emotional drama. It is choosing forgiveness over resentment. And forgiveness is perhaps the most powerful discipline of all. Forgiveness is not approval. It is not forgetting. It is not pretending the wound did not hurt. Forgiveness is the deliberate decision to release the illusion that someone else is responsible for your state of mind. It is the recognition that holding on to grievance chains you to the past and blinds you to the present. Forgiveness is freedom, not for the other person, but for you. Forgiveness is the moment you choose to stop suffering. And when you choose forgiveness regularly, something astonishing begins to happen. Conflicts resolve more quickly. Relationships deepen. New opportunities appear. Old emotional burdens fall away. You begin to feel lighter, more open, more receptive to life. Forgiveness unclutters the heart, and a clear heart becomes a magnet for clarity. Yet even forgiveness is not the end of the journey. It is preparation. Preparation for something deeper. The ability to see others as they truly are. Most people are seen only through the filters of our own fears, expectations, and past wounds. We do not see them, we see our perception of them. But when you practice forgiveness long enough, the filters begin to fade. You start to glimpse something sacred underneath every personality, every defense, every mistake, a radiant core of innocence. Seeing this innocence in others is the most profound form of healing. Because when you see someone truly, you call them forward. You awaken something inside them that remembers its worth. You remind them of what is possible. You hold a vision of their wholeness until they can hold it themselves. To see others truly, you must first see yourself truly. This means embracing your own innocence. Not the kind of innocence that pretends you have never made mistakes, but the deeper innocence that recognizes your mistakes were born from fear, not malice. When you understand this in yourself, you understand it in everyone, and judgment becomes unnecessary. At this depth of awareness, life becomes simpler. You stop overthinking. You stop rehearsing conversations. You stop trying to control outcomes. You live from a deeper intelligence, one that responds to the present moment with clarity rather than reacting from past conditioning. This intelligence reveals itself in surprising ways. A sudden insight, a quiet sense of what to say, a feeling that you should reach out to someone at the perfect moment. These subtle movements of intuition become more frequent as your mind becomes quieter. You begin to trust them. You begin to depend on them. And they guide you with a precision that logic alone could never achieve. You realize that you are not navigating life alone. There is a current moving beneath your decisions, a wisdom flowing through your awareness, a light inside your mind that knows the way even when you do not. When you align with this inner light, life does not become easier, but it becomes meaningful in a way you never imagined. Meaning is the true reward of the spiritual journey. Not comfort, not certainty, meaning. The meaning that comes from knowing your life is not random. The meaning that comes from recognizing patterns of growth in your challenges. The meaning that comes from discovering that your struggles were preparing you for deeper compassion. The meaning that comes from realizing that every moment, no matter how small, is an opportunity to express love. This meaning carries you through the difficult days. It gives you the strength to continue when the ego insists you have failed. It reminds you that transformation is not linear. Some days you rise, some days you fall. Both are part of the process, because the goal is not perfection. The goal is awakening, and awakening is not a destination. It is the ongoing expansion of your capacity to love. Some days love is effortless. Other days love is a discipline. But every day, love is a choice. And as you choose it more consistently, you begin to experience a profound truth. Love is not something you give. It is something you become. When you become love, fear loses its leverage. Conflict loses its appeal. Judgment loses its power. The world still challenges you, but it no longer defines you. You respond to life not from old wounds, but from a deeper wisdom. This is the moment you understand that your spiritual practice has not been changing the world. It has been changing you. And because it has changed you, the world around you changes as well. This is the quiet revolution, of the awakened heart. The revolution begins in perception. It is not the world that changes first, it is the way you see it. When your perception shifts, your entire experience of reality shifts with it. What once appeared threatening begins to feel neutral. What once felt neutral begins to feel meaningful. What once felt meaningless begins to radiate with quiet purpose. This shift in perception is not imagination, it is recognition. Recognition of the truth beneath appearances. Recognition that life is not attacking you, it is teaching you. Recognition that the people who frustrate you are not obstacles. They are mirrors showing you what still needs healing inside your own mind. Recognition that each situation is perfectly designed to reveal something essential. This recognition changes everything. It reveals that your life is not a random collection of events. It is a coherent curriculum tailored for your awakening. Every challenge is a lesson. Every relationship is a teacher. Every moment is a doorway into deeper presence. And once you understand this, resistance softens. Curiosity grows. Gratitude, once reserved for the obviously pleasant, begins to flow into the ordinary and the difficult. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to ask, "What is this showing me?" That single shift, subtle but powerful, marks a new level of spiritual maturity. Because it means you no longer view yourself as a victim of circumstances, but as a collaborator in your own evolution. Collaborating with life requires transparency. Not emotional exhibitionism, but inner honesty. The humility to admit when fear has taken over. The willingness to acknowledge irritation, envy, or insecurity when it arises. The discipline to observe these reactions without letting them define you. When you become transparent with yourself, your inner life becomes a place of clarity instead of confusion. And as clarity grows, guidance becomes easier to sense. Guidance is not some mystical privilege given to a chosen few. It is the natural intelligence of a mind that has become quiet enough to hear itself. It is the voice beneath your reactive thoughts, the voice that feels like calm, like confidence, like direction without pressure. It does not shout. It does not frighten. It does not bargain. It speaks in a tone that feels inevitable, as if the truth has simply reminded you of itself. When people first begin listening for guidance, they often expect dramatic instruction. But the deepest guidance rarely arrives dramatically. It arrives as a subtle shift, a gentle knowing, a pull toward a conversation you were avoiding, a soft nudge to rest when your ego wants to push, a surprising sense of peace when you consider the choice your fear hates. Learning to trust this guidance is one of the greatest challenges on the path. It requires faith in something you cannot yet prove, but faith grows through evidence, small demonstrations that accumulate over time. You begin to notice that following guidance leads to smoother outcomes, softer emotions, clearer conversations. You realize that ignoring guidance leads to tension, regret, or turmoil. And gradually, you stop doubting the inner light that never misleads. With guidance as your companion, life becomes more fluid. Not easier, but more aligned. You begin to move through the world with a quiet confidence that does not depend on circumstances. You may not know the entire plan, but you trust the next step. And that is enough. This trust opens the way for deeper service. Service is not about fixing others. It is about offering your presence where it is needed. Sometimes you offer words. Sometimes you offer silence. Sometimes you offer your time, your attention, or your patience. What matters is not the form, but the intention. Real service carries a vibration that can be felt. It soothes without effort. It uplifts without force. It heals without announcement. People who serve from this state do not see themselves as saviors. They see themselves as conduits. They understand that the healing does not come from them, but through them. Their job is not to impress or to be right, but to be available, to be a vessel through which clarity can flow, This availability transforms your relationships. You begin to notice that the quality of a relationship is not determined by how often you agree, but by how deeply you connect. Real connection arises when you are fully present, without agenda, without defensiveness, without trying to win. It is born from a willingness to see the person in front of you as they truly are, not as a role, not as a problem, not as a memory, but as a soul. When you see someone this way, they feel it instantly. They relax, they unfold, they reveal themselves in ways they never have before. And in this openness, something sacred passes between you, a recognition of shared humanity, shared vulnerability, shared longing for peace. This mutual recognition is the beginning of healing relationships. Healing relationships are not perfect. They are honest. They are spacious. They allow room for mistakes, misunderstandings, and growth. In a healing relationship, conflict is not a threat, but a doorway to deeper intimacy. Instead of weaponizing pain, you explore it. Instead of withdrawing into silence, you communicate with sincerity. Instead of blaming, you take responsibility for your perception. Responsibility is the most transformative force in relationships. Not responsibility for another person's emotions, but responsibility for your interpretations of them. The moment you stop holding others accountable for your inner reactions, you reclaim your power. You realize that peace was never dependent on anyone else's behavior. It was dependent on your willingness to see differently. This realization liberates you. It frees you from trying to control others. It frees you from trying to predict their reactions. It frees you from building emotional walls. You begin to interact from a place of curiosity rather than fear. You listen more deeply. You speak more authentically. You forgive more quickly. And as you do, the atmosphere around you changes. People feel safer in your presence. They feel less judged. They feel more willing to reveal their genuine selves. This trust becomes the soil in which real transformation grows. Your role in this process is simple. Keep showing up with sincerity. Sincerity is more powerful than charisma, more transformative than cleverness, more healing than perfection. People don't need you to have all the answers. They need you to be real. They need you to be steady. They need you to meet them with an open heart. An open heart is not soft. It is strong. It can withstand discomfort without closing. It can feel sorrow without collapsing. It can witness conflict without attacking. An open heart is not naive. It sees clearly. It responds wisely. It understands that fear is a cry for love, and love is the only response that truly heals. And yet, even as your heart expands, you will still encounter your own shadows. Old patterns will resurface unexpectedly. Old fears will whisper their familiar lies. Old defenses will try to reassert themselves. This is not regression. It is integration. The mind releases in layers. Each layer brings an opportunity for deeper clarity. When an old pattern returns, do not despair. Welcome it. Observe it. Ask it what it is trying to protect. Beneath every fear lies a longing for safety, for acceptance, for belonging. When you meet your fear with tenderness instead of judgment, it begins to dissolve. It reveals its origin. It releases its grip. This is the kind of inner work that changes a life. Not dramatic catharsis, but gentle curiosity. Not emotional overwhelm, but compassionate awareness. Not self-improvement, but self-liberation. Self-liberation is the realization that nothing outside you can imprison you. Only your perceptions can do that. And when your perceptions change, your freedom becomes non-negotiable. This freedom grows as your identity shifts. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts, your emotions, your history, or your roles. You are the awareness behind them. The witness, the presence, the stillness that experiences everything without being harmed by anything. When you begin to live from this awareness, your life takes on a new texture. Conflict becomes less sticky. Criticism becomes less personal. Uncertainty becomes less threatening. You begin to flow with life rather than resist it. Flow is not passivity, it is receptivity. It is the ability to respond to life with trust instead of tension. A flowing mind is creative, intuitive, adaptive. It knows when to act and when to wait. It knows when to speak and when to listen. It knows when to hold on and when to let go. Letting go becomes one of your greatest strengths. You learn to release the things that once consumed you: grievances, arguments, comparisons, regrets. You realize these mental attachments were never part of you. They were emotional habits, and habits can be replaced. As you let go of the unnecessary, your mind becomes spacious. In this spaciousness, joy arises effortlessly. Not the excitement of egoic pleasure, but the joy of being aligned with yourself. The joy of breathing without resistance. The joy of existing without inner conflict. This joy is subtle but profound. It is the quiet contentment of a mind at peace. It is the feeling that nothing is missing. It is the recognition that you are whole. Wholeness is not something you achieve, it is something you uncover. It is revealed when you stop fighting yourself, when you stop trying to become something else, when you stop believing you are broken. Wholeness is your natural state, obscured only by fear. Fear dissolves in the presence of love, not instantly, not always gracefully, but inevitably. Because fear is a misunderstanding and love is the correction. Every time you choose love, through forgiveness, patience, compassion, or presence, you correct your mind. You strengthen the truth within you. The truth is simple. You are here to remember who you are. You are here to learn how to love. You are here to bring light into the places you once abandoned. You are here to awaken, not by escaping life, but by engaging with it wholeheartedly. This is the journey, not a quest for perfection, but a return to sincerity, not an ascent into superiority, but a descent into authenticity, not a chase for spiritual power, but a homecoming to your own inner peace. The path continues, and in continuing, you become the very thing you once sought. There comes a point on the spiritual path when you realize you are no longer walking alone. Not because someone has joined you on the outside, but because something has awakened on the inside. A constant presence, a steady awareness, a quiet companionship that does not leave. It is not a voice, though sometimes it speaks. It is not a feeling, though sometimes it warms you. It is not a thought, though sometimes it guides you. It is something deeper than all of these. It is the recognition that the truth within you has never abandoned you. This presence grows stronger as you grow more sincere. It becomes clearer as you become more honest. It speaks more often when you learn to listen. And eventually, you begin to trust it more than your fears. You begin to rely on it more than your strategies. You begin to recognize that its wisdom is far more stable than anything the ego has offered you. With this presence guiding you, life becomes a profound dialogue. Every experience becomes a conversation. Every relationship becomes a lesson. Every challenge becomes a message. You begin to realize that nothing happens by accident. Everything is purposeful. Everything is part of your unfolding. Everything is shaping you into the person you were created to become. Yet even with this profound awareness, you remain human. You still feel the full spectrum of emotions. You still make mistakes. You still lose your way at times. And this is not a flaw in your spiritual development. It is part of it. Humanity is not the obstacle to awakening. It is the medium through which awakening reveals itself. Your imperfections are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of being alive. They are invitations to compassion. They remind you that the purpose of the spiritual path is not to rise above your humanity, but to illuminate it. To bring light into the places where fear once hid. To bring tenderness into the places where shame once echoed. To bring acceptance into the places where judgment once ruled. As you embrace your imperfections, something extraordinary happens. You begin to embrace the imperfections of others. Compassion becomes natural. Empathy becomes instinctive. You stop expecting people to behave according to your script. You stop demanding they heal on your timeline. You allow them to be who they are: messy, learning, growing, flawed, beautiful. And in that acceptance, relationships transform. They become more spacious, more forgiving, more real. You no longer approach people as projects to fix or threats to defend against. You approach them as souls navigating the same storm, trying to find the same peace. You meet them where they are, without needing them to meet you where you are. This is the art of true connection, and it is only possible when you no longer need the world to validate you. When your peace comes from within, you stop bargaining for it. When your worth is no longer dependent on others, you stop negotiating for approval. When you know you are whole, you stop seeking completeness in external places. This inner stability gives rise to a new kind of confidence, not the brittle confidence of ego, but the quiet confidence of clarity. You trust yourself. You trust your boundaries. You trust your intuition. You trust your capacity to navigate life with wisdom. This trust does not make you arrogant. It makes you grounded. You no longer rush. You no longer chase. You no longer panic. You respond to life with a measured calm. And from this calm, courage is born. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear make your decisions. Courage is the moment you choose compassion over defensiveness. The moment you choose honesty over comfort. The moment you choose forgiveness over pride. The moment you choose presence over distraction. Every courageous choice expands your awareness. Every courageous moment strengthens your soul. Every courageous decision reveals a deeper truth about who you really are. Over time, these moments accumulate. They form a new identity, not the identity of the ego, but the identity of the awakened heart, the heart that sees clearly, the heart that gives generously, the heart that forgives readily, the heart that understands its purpose. An awakened heart does not live for itself alone. It lives for the world. It lives for the people it can touch. It lives for the moments it can uplift. Awakening is never selfish. It is naturally expansive. It naturally flows outward. The more awake you become, the more you want to help, not out of obligation, but out of overflow. And this overflow changes lives, sometimes in ways you witness directly, more often in ways you never see. A kind word spoken at the right moment, a patient response during someone's worst hour, a gentle presence when the room is tense. These moments matter more than you know. They are the threads that weave healing into the fabric of humanity. To awaken is to become aware of your impact, not in a grandiose way, but in a humble, responsible way. You begin to realize that every thought, every gesture, every choice contributes to the collective field of the human mind. Your peace helps others find peace. Your clarity invites others into clarity. Your compassion softens the hearts around you. You become a lighthouse without trying. You shine because you are aligned. You shine because you have removed what once blocked the light. You shine because you have returned to your natural state. This natural state is not extraordinary. It is deeply ordinary. It is the quiet joy of being alive. It is the gentle gratitude that accompanies a peaceful mind. It is the subtle radiance that others feel when they are near you. It is the unshakable awareness that everything is connected, everything is meaningful, everything is part of a larger unfolding. And in this awareness, life becomes sacred, not in a dramatic or mystical way, but in the most intimate moments: washing dishes, speaking kindly, breathing consciously, being present. Sacredness is not found in escape from the world. It is found in devotion to it, devotion to the present moment, devotion to truth, devotion to love. This devotion shapes you into someone you once dreamed of becoming. Not perfect, not untouchable, but sincere, steady, compassionate, clear. someone who understands that spiritual greatness is not measured in miracles performed or visions received, but in the quality of one's presence. Your presence is your true gift to the world. It is the culmination of your practice. It is the expression of your inner work. It is the living proof that awakening is possible for anyone who chooses it. And if you continue choosing it, day after day, moment after moment, something inevitable happens. You begin to radiate a love that requires no explanation, a peace that cannot be shaken, a wisdom that does not need to be spoken to be understood. This is the awakening of the heart. This is the transformation of the mind. This is the purpose of the journey, not to escape life, but to illuminate it, not to transcend humanity, but to sanctify it, not to become more than human, but to finally become fully human, awake, aware, loving, free. And this is where the journey continues, not in grand ascents, but in humble choices, not in mountaintop revelations, but in everyday interactions, not in dramatic awakenings, but in the quiet discipline of choosing love again and again. The truth is simple. You become what you practice. If you practice fear, you become fearful. If you practice judgment, you become hardened. If you practice avoidance, you become fragmented. If you practice love, you become luminous. And when you become luminous, you light the path for others without even trying. This is how the world changes. One mind, one heart, one sincere decision at a time. The journey is not finished. It never will be. But you are walking it with more awareness, more strength, more clarity, and more love than you ever have before. And that, quietly, profoundly, is enough.